Meanwhile, in Syria, the Free Syrian Army says in 2 days they could start executing 48 Iranians they kidnapped in August. They claim their captives are revolutionary guards. Tehran says they're pilgrims. The threat would be carried out if the Syrian regime does not fulfill demands to release rebels' fighters and stop the shelling. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by John Loughlin from the Paris-based Institute of Democracy and Cooperation. Mr. Loughlin, good to see you today. Thanks very much for coming on the programme. What do you make of the opposition's methods here? First, terror attacks, and now threats to kill hostages from a different country.
Well, I think it does underline the nature of at least some elements within the Syrian rebels, who, of course, are presented in most of the Western media as freedom fighters. If they were to carry out their threat to execute these hostages, then I think people would understand that we are dealing with a very vicious insurgency and one which any state would be entitled and indeed obliged to try to put down. This isn't the first time that they have done things like this. There have been reports in the Western media going back months telling how the Syrian rebels would slit the throats of the Syrian army soldiers that they captured. So it's something they've done before, admittedly against their own nationals. But it does show another very important point, which I'd like to stress, and that is, in virtue of the fact that they have captured these Iranians, we can see now how intervention in the Syrian civil war, intervention practiced, of course, initially by the West, by Turkey and by its Western allies in the Gulf, has led to an escalation of intervention by other powers, in this case Iran. And in my view, this is the iron rule of interventionism. Once you start, you never know where you're going to stop, because other countries end up intervening as well. And Iran, after all, has said that it will fight if there is any further Western military intervention in Syria. So we see the snowball effect here, created by Western interventions.
All right, so John, as you say, it's possible, as you mentioned, that Iran is saying that it could get involved, that it's willing to fight if indeed it is drawn into the conflict. John, if I may for a moment, the latest news now from the Syrian rebels getting reports that they've seized an air defence base with a cache of missiles just outside Damascus. If that's indeed the case, how could that impact the course of the fighting, do you think?
Well, obviously, these kinds of things show that the rebel force is a very considerable military force. I have to say that all other announcements of an imminent victory by the rebels have proved to be false. The battle for Aleppo was said to be decisive by the rebels at the end of September. That's only a week or so ago. And to date, in the last year and a half since the conflict broke out, it has to be said that the Syrian government has managed to basically maintain control of a lot of its territory. So, of course, we'll have to see what happens. But clearly, the seizure of an airbase is an incredibly important military event. And if that seizure remains valid, then it will be an important military victory for the rebels.
Well, John, let's address the past 48 hours or so regarding Syria and Turkey tensions now. That this whole bill authorising cross-border military operations that Ankara has approved. Now, is it just perhaps possibly a warning to Syria, or could it be a first step towards a full-scale confrontation?
Turkey, I think, would indeed like, in spite of its protests to the contrary, to see this issue resolved militarily. I may be wrong about this, but Turkey has been in the forefront of the support for the rebels. Turkey is allowing the rebels to be trained and armed inside Turkey and then to cross over into Syria. Its interference, its intervention in the Syrian conflict has been extremely important, indeed decisive. Turkey says it doesn't want a war, but this is now the second time that Turkey has been involved in a military conflict with Syria. You'll remember, I'm sure your viewers will too, that a Turkish aircraft was shot down a few months ago. And Turkey at that stage also tried, but failed, to use that as a pretext for some kind of military response. This latest parliamentary resolution is another attempt to do the same thing. So I think Turkey's role in this is very questionable indeed.
When you talk about Turkey's role in this being very questionable indeed, let's talk about what some are saying is a very, very heavy-handed response. We had a Syrian shell that goes into a Turkish border town. 5 people are killed. Then Turkey responds with approximately 70 strikes in response to approximately 1. Does that sound like an adequate response to you?
No, it sounds like a disproportionate response to me. Moreover, although the Security Council press statement condemned Syria for launching the mortar. Syria, of course, herself, the government itself, says that it doesn't know who's launched the mortar. It denies that it launched it. There's an investigation. But even if Syria had launched the mortar, the fact is there are rebel or terrorist training camps on the Turkish side of the border, and international law on this is perfectly clear. If one state supports armed rebels in a neighboring state or in another state, then that state, the state which is the victim of those rebel attacks, is completely entitled in international law to take measures against them. So I disagree with the Security Council press statement that this is necessarily a violation of international law by Syria. We will have to wait and see whether it's proven that the mortar was launched by them. And even if it was, there might be grounds for arguing that they had acted in conformity with international law.
All right, John Laughlin, the director of the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation. Many thanks for coming on RT today. Thank you.